Imagine waking up tomorrow to find your banking app frozen, your savings suddenly inaccessible, not for hours, but for weeks. Outside, long lines form at empty ATMs and families wait under the morning heat, hoping the cash inside hasn't run out. A single mother grips her child's hand, staring at a screen that refuses to load. Overseas, workers in Dubai and Hong Kong refresh their remittance apps, watching balances stall as global markets fall into panic. In Luzon, farmers stand over typhoon-damaged rice fields while rough waves crash against contested waters in the South China Sea. This scenario is no longer distant or unimaginable. A global economic reset is quietly taking shape, slow, silent, and unforgiving. Behind today's headlines of conflict in Ukraine and the Middle East, the foundations of global finance are shifting. The U.S. dollar faces growing resistance from BRICS nations, which are expanding and exploring their own currency systems. Supply chains, the hidden arteries of the global economy, weaken with every new tariff, storm, or political standoff. The Philippine peso, hovering near 59 to the dollar, signals deeper vulnerabilities ahead. We've lived through previews before. The 2008 crash that wiped out livelihoods and the 2020 pandemic that crippled ports and drove inflation to 6–7%. But the true danger lies in how unprepared the Philippines is today. Debt has surged to 63% of GDP, and remittances, nearly a tenth of our economy, depend on foreign labor markets that may shrink without warning. As the world reshuffles its economic order, will the Philippines adapt and protect its people, or be pushed to the margins? In this breakdown, we examine 8 critical vulnerabilities, each one a ticking clock for ordinary Filipinos. Because pretending the storm isn't coming won't keep you dry, preparing now might. Number 1. Debt crisis and weak peso, the silent stranglehold. Imagine Elena, a 52-year-old teacher in Quezon City who has worked tirelessly to pay down her home loan. One morning, global interest rates spike again after another surge in inflation caused by oil disruptions in the Middle East. Her fixed-rate mortgage resets, rising nearly 20% overnight. What was once a manageable payment of 15,000 pesos now threatens her ability to cover her daughter's tuition. For families like hers, every rate hike is a punch to the gut. This is not exaggeration. The Philippines' public debt reached 17.56 trillion pesos by October 2025, bringing the debt-to-GDP ratio to over 63%, its highest level in 2 decades. Much of this debt was accumulated after the pandemic to stimulate growth, which managed to reach 5.3% this year. But growth fueled by borrowing has limits. As BRICS nations test alternatives to the US dollar, foreign investors demand higher returns, pushing borrowing costs even higher. The peso, already down 8% this year, magnifies the cost of every imported good, from fuel to basic medicine. This feels familiar. In 1997, the collapse of the Thai baht triggered a chain reaction that cost the Philippines nearly 1% of its GDP and pushed many households into crisis. Today, with external debt above $140 billion, any global reset could inflate our debt servicing obligations by hundreds of billions of pesos a year. Farmers like Juan in Nueva Ecija, already pressured by rising fertilizer prices and stubborn inflation, struggle to repay small loans. Businesses scale back, unemployment rises, and economic confidence frays. A major trigger could be a U.S. recession, now estimated at a 40% likelihood, which would destabilize global currency markets. For families like Elena's, the consequences are immediate: smaller meals, delayed dreams, and constant financial strain. If debt tightens around the country's neck, what happens when another pillar, our overseas workers, begins to falter? Number 2. OFW vulnerability, the exile's echo. Picture Maria, a caregiver in Hong Kong who sends home 50,000 pesos a month to support her parents and siblings in Cebu. Her remittances keep the lights on, pay medical bills, and keep her family afloat. But as the global reset spreads, triggered by shifting BRICS trade blocs and costly U.S. tariffs, labor markets abroad contract. automation accelerates, and companies freeze hiring. Maria opens her phone one morning to see her contract terminated and her remaining savings shrinking due to currency swings. Over 1 million overseas Filipino workers help sustain the Philippine economy. Their remittances, over $41 billion in 2025, represent more than 8% of the nation's GDP, surpassing even the value of many major export sectors. From January to July alone, remittances reached over $22 billion, a testament to how heavily the country relies on its workers abroad. But this inflow is fragile. A synchronized downturn, U.S. unemployment rising above 5%, Europe slowing, and Saudi Arabia implementing new nationalization policies could abruptly reduce job opportunities. History offers a warning. In 2009, deployment of OFWs dropped sharply, remittances declined, and more than 1 million Filipinos slipped into poverty. Today, with a large share of OFWs in sectors vulnerable to automation and local hiring preferences, even a 10% drop in remittances could erase hundreds of billions of pesos from the economy. Children would leave schools, families would default on loans, and small businesses funded by OFW money would shutter. The Filipino diaspora has long been the backbone of our economy, building homes and futures through sacrifice. But if global conditions cut off that lifeline, millions at home will feel the shock. And without this support, the nation becomes even more exposed to the next major threat: the strain on our food supply. Number 3. Food security fragility. Envision Tomas, a retiree in Iloilo who starts each morning with simple meals prepared from affordable rice. One day, he finds that global shipments have stalled, not because of local weather, but due to a combination of Red Sea trade disruptions and major exporters holding back supplies. Almost overnight, rice prices surge from 50 to 75 pesos per kilo. Tomas begins skipping meals, and his health worsens as basic staples become harder to find. The Philippines remains the world's top importer of rice, bringing in as much as 5 million tons between 2025 and 2026. That's 20 to 30% of total consumption. And during lean months, dependency rises even higher because domestic yields lag behind regional competitors like Vietnam. Meanwhile, global fertilizer shortages and climate disturbances complicate local production. In 2025 alone, the country faced at least 10 typhoons, pushing yields down by double digits. The memory of the 2008 rice crisis still lingers, when prices quadrupled in some areas and unrest spread across more than 20 provinces. Today, with nearly 40% of households experiencing some form of food insecurity, another spike could devastate millions. Even a modest increase in import costs could add 100 billion pesos to household expenses across the country. Families line up in urban centers, while farmers themselves struggle to access grain due to damaged roads and disrupted supply chains. It isn't just rice. Imports of fish, corn, onions and wheat, many of which the Philippines relies on heavily, could also falter. As costs climb and supplies thin, hunger becomes a multiplying threat. But food is only one part of survival. The next question is whether the Philippines can even keep its energy systems running. Number 4. Energy dependence. Imagine Raul, a tricycle driver in Bacolod navigating afternoon traffic. As he glances at the fuel gauge, he notices the price per liter has jumped from 70 to nearly 100 pesos. Global crude oil has surged to $150 per barrel due to rising tensions near critical shipping routes. His daily route, once enough to cover expenses and still bring earnings home, now leaves him with almost nothing. With power interruptions spreading across nearby communities, even household necessities become a challenge. The Philippines relies on imported fuel for almost the entirety of its needs, with oil imports accounting for nearly 40 million barrels each year. Coal and natural gas, used for most power generation, also come largely from abroad. When global supply tightens or prices rise, the country has little buffer. Compounding this challenge is an aging energy grid that experiences high transmission losses, among the worst in Southeast Asia. The situation recalls the oil crisis of the 1970s, when prices skyrocketed and economic growth plummeted. Today, rising energy costs could add 2 percentage points to inflation, burdening households that are already stretched. For factories, power instability could halt operations and put hundreds of thousands of jobs at risk. In regions like Mindanao, where many communities rely on diesel generators, prolonged outages could disrupt everything from classrooms to health clinics. There is progress in renewable energy, with solar capacity increasing and long-term targets aiming for more sustainable sources. But during a global reset, transition alone cannot shield the country from sudden shocks. And if energy falters, the next blow emerges from another critical weakness: access to foreign currency. Number 5. Dollar shortage scenario. Meet Liza, who runs a small eatery in Pampanga that depends on imported cooking oil, soy sauce, and other essentials. One day, her suppliers inform her that new orders must be paid in dollars and at a higher rate, because banks have begun limiting foreign currency access. As the peso weakens further and reserves thin, she struggles to maintain her menu. Eventually, she has no choice but to let go of her trusted cook just to keep her business alive. The Philippines' foreign reserves, though still substantial, have gradually declined, now covering just 6 months of imports compared to 9 months in earlier periods. This erosion is fueled by persistent current account deficits and reduced foreign investment. The shift toward non-dollar trade among major economies also complicates currency flows. As investors diversify, pressure mounts on the peso, which has already reached record lows in recent months. The country has experienced this before. In 1998, during the Asian financial crisis, reserves dropped sharply and the peso collapsed, triggering bank runs and business closures. Today, small enterprises, making up nearly all registered businesses, are particularly vulnerable to sudden increases in costs. Even a modest drop in dollar supplies can push inflation higher and force companies to cut production. Farmers who export goods may struggle to ship products, while households face rising costs on imported groceries. There are opportunities for diversification and strengthening the balance of payments. But if a global reset constrains the flow of dollars, local businesses and families will face profound hardships. And this strain deepens when international trade routes themselves begin to clog. Number 6. China-US tension, blocked trade routes choking supply chains. Visualize Carlo, a welder in Batangas who works in an electronics factory. His company relies on components from Shenzhen, which make up the bulk of their production. One week, shipments are delayed due to escalating tariff battles and increased inspections in contested waters. The assembly line slows, overtime disappears, and Carlo begins to worry about paying upcoming school fees. Every passing day of disrupted supply threatens both his job and the company's stability. The Philippines trades heavily with China, moving tens of billions of dollars in goods annually. But as tensions rise between China and the United States, the global supply chain becomes increasingly fragile. U.S. penalties on redirected Chinese exports, combined with China's retaliatory measures, disrupt flow through critical sea lanes. The South China Sea, which carries trillions of dollars in annual trade, becomes a focal point for geopolitical friction. Past confrontations during the Cold War slowed economic growth across Asia. Today, the potential impact is even greater due to the complexity of modern manufacturing. The Philippines' reliance on imported intermediate goods makes it especially vulnerable. Logistics costs, already high, surge even further as companies scramble for alternative suppliers. Factories in major industrial zones reduce output, leading to layoffs and reduced income for thousands of workers. Caught between two economic giants, the Philippines faces difficult decisions. Aligning too closely with one risks alienating the other. Staying neutral becomes increasingly challenging. If trade routes choke, the heart of Philippine manufacturing beats weaker, setting the stage for the next threat: a broader collapse across key industries. Number 7. Manufacturing collapse. Consider Ana, a garment worker in Baguio whose factory once thrived on export orders. Lately, those orders have dwindled. International buyers increasingly favor Vietnam or Malaysia, where infrastructure is stronger, power supply is more stable, and logistics are cheaper. Her work hours are cut, and her daily wage barely covers basic needs. She wonders how long the factory can survive. The Philippines struggles to compete with regional neighbors that have aggressively modernized their manufacturing sectors. Despite exporting nearly $100 billion worth of goods, the country's industrial growth lags. Issues like high electricity costs, congested ports, and limited transport networks discourage new investments. Many multinational companies shifting away from China, known as the China Plus One strategy, still overlook the Philippines due to these persistent inefficiencies. This is not new. In the 1990s, while other countries surged ahead, Philippine manufacturing stagnated, missing key opportunities tied to global trade expansions. Today, projections suggest a possible 20% drop in foreign direct investment, which could threaten more than 1 million jobs in industries like electronics and automotive parts. Workers like Anna face uncertain futures, and entire communities dependent on manufacturing may suffer. The country has strengths: a young workforce, strong English proficiency, and large consumer markets. But these advantages cannot overcome structural disadvantages without decisive reform. And if manufacturing weakens further, the next vulnerability becomes even harder to ignore: the country's fragile infrastructure. Number 8. Infrastructure and logistics failure. See Diego, a truck driver transporting goods across Samar and Leyte. He battles potholes, landslide-prone routes, and unpredictable weather that repeatedly delays his deliveries. One week, a typhoon disrupts port operations and ground transportation at the same time. The goods he carries spoil, costing him dearly. His income shrinks, and small businesses depending on those deliveries struggle to survive. The Philippines' logistics costs remain among the highest in Asia, taking up more than a quarter of the country's total economic output. Climate events intensify this burden. In 2025 alone, storms caused significant damage to critical infrastructure, including roads, bridges, and warehouses. Cyber attacks add a new layer of risk, targeting power grids and transportation systems, leaving companies scrambling to maintain operations. This mirrors earlier decades when global oil shocks and domestic instability crippled transportation networks and slowed national growth. Despite increased government budgets for infrastructure in recent years, completion rates often fall short. Delays in major roadworks and port upgrades cause bottlenecks, raising the cost of goods and limiting economic mobility. These inefficiencies compound quickly, affecting millions of workers and businesses nationwide. Despite ongoing efforts to improve connectivity, the gaps remain wide. And as infrastructure falters, digital systems, once seen as the path forward, face their own challenges. Number 9. Digital banking weakness. Recall Sophia, who relies on digital banking to receive remittances from family abroad. One evening, she attempts to transfer funds to pay bills, only to find her account locked. A cyber attack has struck the platform, freezing thousands of users out of their money. Days later, she learns her savings were compromised through ransomware. While investigations unfold, her financial responsibilities pile up. Cybercrime in the Philippines has surged, with thousands of incidents recorded in the past year, many targeting the financial sector. Hackers exploit gaps in outdated systems, phishing schemes, and vulnerabilities exposed during times of crisis. As geopolitical tensions rise, coordinated cyber attacks become more likely, targeting banks, government agencies, and payment platforms used by millions. The country has lived through similar cases. In 2016, a major breach siphoned off funds from overseas reserves, exposing weaknesses in digital security. Today, with more than 70 million Filipinos using online banking and mobile wallets, the consequences of a breach are far more widespread. Financial disruptions can quickly turn into personal emergencies, especially for those who depend on timely payments. Efforts to strengthen digital safeguards continue, but implementation is uneven and regulatory oversight is still developing. For individuals like Sophia, trust in digital systems becomes fragile, and when multiple vulnerabilities collide, the nation faces a larger crisis, one where inflation, unemployment, and supply chain failures converge. Number 10. The perfect storm. Inflation, unemployment, supply chains unite. Now imagine a scenario where several crises erupt at once. Major economies move further away from the US dollar. driving up global interest rates. A powerful typhoon halts port operations, and a cyber attack disrupts banking networks. Inflation climbs past 6%, unemployment rises, and government resources strain under rising debt costs. Households that once managed to get by now find their savings disappearing faster than they can replenish them. The Philippines has experienced downturns before, but a convergence of global financial instability, disrupted trade routes, and domestic vulnerabilities could create a far deeper recession. Export revenues fall as demand weakens, and factories operate below capacity. Families across the country stretch every peso, ration food, and delay major expenses. The pressure builds socially and economically, testing the resilience of communities already facing climate and cost of living challenges. Despite these risks, the Philippines has shown an extraordinary ability to recover from adversity. Past recoveries, marked by strong growth periods, highlight the country's potential. But recovery does not happen by accident. It requires preparation, clear strategy, and collective action. The global reset poses a challenge, but also an opportunity to strengthen foundations before the next shock arrives. The global economic reset is no longer a distant prediction. It is unfolding now, reshaping currencies, trade routes, and labor markets in ways that affect every Filipino household. The Philippines, with its vibrant culture and hardworking population, must navigate this shifting landscape while facing significant vulnerabilities, from heavy debt and energy dependence to food insecurity and digital fragility. Yet vulnerability does not equal defeat. The Filipino spirit has endured wars, disasters, and economic crises. What matters now is preparation. Every household can take small but meaningful steps. Start by building a modest stock of essential food supplies and rotating them regularly. Create an emergency fund, even if contributions begin with just a few hundred pesos a week. Explore practical skills such as gardening, basic repairs, or digital literacy that can provide income or resilience during difficult periods. Connect with neighbors and local groups to build community support systems, share resources, and exchange knowledge. Support local businesses and reduce reliance on hard-to-obtain imports whenever possible. Ignoring the signs will not shield anyone from the consequences. Action, early and consistent, offers protection. Share this video with someone who needs a wake-up call. And subscribe to Discovering the Earth, where we help you make sense of a changing world and prepare for what comes next. Together, we can face uncertainty with clarity and purpose.